Once upon a time, in a village called Zoro, where the earth was newly formed and the gods were still watching over the people, lived a man named Obike. Obike owned a small farm where he grew a few crops and animals, but he wasn't satisfied. He was very greedy and looked at other people's farms with envious eyes. Not only was Obike greedy, but he was also very lazy. People in the village avoided him because of his greedy and lazy nature. Why won't he work? Why can't he be like his friend Chika, they said. Obike had a very good friend named Chika. Chika also owned a large farm next to Obike's, but unlike Obike, Chika was very hard-working and grateful. His best friend, Chika, would advise him, "Obike, stop looking at other people's wealth. Instead, work hard on your farm so that you have big crops to sell in the market when the harvest approaches." But Obike didn't listen. He only frowned and said, "I have my ways, Chika. Let me be." Every night, in his greed for more crops, Obike would go around all the farms in Zoro village, stealing all their crops. He plucked everything and left before anyone could see him, so no one knew who stole their crops. He always went at dawn and returned before dusk, pretending as if he didn't know anything. The villagers wondered, "What is happening to our crops? Who is stealing them?" But Obike kept his mouth shut, refusing to say a thing. He was both lazy and greedy, not knowing his actions would bring consequences. And so, Obike continued to live in Zoro village, wandering lazily in the day and stealing the crops at night. He wasn't satisfied with the few crops he gathered from his farm. He wanted more, so he stole from other people's farms. The villagers continued to wonder who came to their farms and stole all their crops, not knowing it was Obike. But high above the sky, the gods weren't happy with what Obike was doing. They waited for him to change his ways, but if he couldn't, they would place a curse on him, a curse Obike wouldn't be able to control. Despite the trouble, Obike continued to steal the villagers' crops. He didn't focus on the little the gods had given him but stole from others. He didn't know that his actions and greedy nature would soon attract a heavy curse from the gods. One day, as Obike wandered around lazily in Zoro village looking for the next farm to steal from, he didn't find any. All he found were dried leaves and empty husks. This was because Obike had stolen crops from all the farms, and there was nothing left except the crops on Chika's farm, which he hadn't yet stolen from. He turned to Chika's farm and smiled mischievously. Chika's farm was full of green leaves and big crops which no one had plucked. Then, as the wind blew, the spirit of greed entered Obike's heart, and his eyes shone with greed. He thought, "My little farm isn't enough for me. I can only get more if I take from others." And so, Obike decided to steal from Chika's farm. He struck by night, and by morning, everything was gone. The next morning, when Chika came to work, he looked at his farm and was shocked at what he saw. The crops on his farm were gone, and there was nothing left except the empty husks and broken stems. He shouted, "Who stole my crops?" But no one replied. He asked Obike, "Do you know what happened to my farm?" But Obike denied knowing anything about it. The villagers looked at Chika's farm with pity, wondering who might have stolen his crops. But the truth was that it was his own friend, Obike. He had stolen all of Chika's crops by night, and by morning, everything was gone. He planned to sell them during the harvest season so he could make more money. However, his evil act reached the ears of the gods, and they were not happy with Obike. In anger and fury, they cursed him. They whispered to the wind, "May the very wealth you seek become the curse which torments you." Not knowing about the curse, Obike continued to steal from other villagers. He stole not only to eat, but also to sell at the market. But the gods of Zoro village had placed a curse on him, and slowly but surely, the curse began to take root. One sunny afternoon, Obike came to the market to sell some of the crops he had stolen, thinking that today would be just like the other days. But when he got there, nobody wanted to come to his stall. They all knew he wasn't someone to be trusted. Suddenly, an old woman with white-grey hair walked up to him. She came from a faraway village, and her clothes were covered in dirt and stones. She carried a huge bag on her back filled with golden fruits and said to Obike, "Please give me some food. I came from a faraway village and haven't eaten in days." Obike looked at the old woman. He wasn't thinking about what the old woman had said. Instead, his eyes were focused on the huge bag the old woman carried behind her. Then, as the wind blew, greed crept into his heart, and he told her, "I can give you some of my food, but you have to give me some of the golden fruits you are carrying." The old woman thought for a moment, then agreed. She brought out 2 golden apples from the bag. One was very big and juicy, while the other was small and tiny. Then she spoke, "You must choose one. If you eat the small apple, it will give you the power to turn anything into gold, albeit only for a few weeks, and it would banish. But if you eat the big apple, you will be able to turn anything you touch into gold, but you won't be able to control it, and it will never leave you." Obike looked at the 2 apples, his mind filling with greed. He knew he couldn't control the power of the big golden apple, but his greedy nature was pushing him to take it. He steeled his heart and decided to take the bigger apple, not knowing he had made the worst decision of his life. He took the apple and handed the old woman a sack filled with crops. But before the old woman left, she looked at Obike with pity and sighed, knowing that his greed had already eaten deep into him. Shaking her head, she took the sack of crops and left. Obike looked at the big golden apple in his hand, thinking he had made the right choice, not knowing that he was soon going to regret his decision. That evening, as the market was closing, Obike looked at the big golden apple the old woman had given him. He was skeptical at first, but his greed clouded his reasoning. He picked up the apple and started eating it. Just as Obike finished eating the apple, he felt a strong power rushing through him. He reached for one of the fruits on the table and gently touched it. Suddenly, Obike saw the fruit changing color, turning into pure, solid gold. He looked at his 2 hands in shock, thinking that with this power, he wouldn't have to work hard again in his life. But Obike didn't know his happiness would only be for a short while. He was about to regret taking the big golden apple instead of the smaller one. When Obike returned to his small hut, he started turning everything he owned into gold. He turned the chairs, the tables, and even the plates into gold. Soon his entire hut was filled with items radiating in shimmering gold. When he was done, he was already exhausted, and night had fallen. So he walked into his room and went to sleep. But that night, as Obike lay in bed, thinking about all the money he would make from selling the golden items in the market, he imagined himself swimming in a pile of gold and wearing the most beautiful clothes in the village. Little did he know the gods of Zoro were watching him, and soon he would pay the price of his greed. After selling the gold in the market, Obike acquired a huge fortune. He bought many houses, lands, and cattle. The villagers were wondering where Obike got so much gold from, but decided not to ask. Obike moved from the small hut he was staying in to a big house. The house was filled with items Obike would never have dreamt of, and the walls shimmered with gold. He was staring at his house proudly, not knowing it would all soon leave him, leaving him in a disaster he had entangled himself in. One day, Obike, in exhaustion, sat at the dining table to eat. He took hold of the food, but to his surprise, the food immediately turned into gold. He tried touching the water, but it also turned into gold. At first he was confused and didn't understand what was happening, but soon he remembered the power the old woman had given him. It was then that Obike realized he could no longer eat or drink because of his power. At first, Obike decided not to bother about it, thinking it would eventually wear off. But as the days passed, the curse only continued to grow stronger. The ground he passed, and even the people he touched, turned into gold. The villagers were whispering, "It's a curse from the gods, we must avoid him." Obike's heart was filled with pain. He could no longer go anywhere, and the villagers avoided him because of the curse. He couldn't even eat or drink anymore, and because of that, he started to grow thinner and thinner until he looked no more than a skeleton. Every day, his heart ached with pain, and his eyes were filled with sadness. He regretted his greed and wished he hadn't taken the big apple. Some villagers were confused at how Obike had so much money but still looked so thin. A few of them, in concern, asked Obike, "What's happening to you?" But Obike smiled and told them, "I'm okay, I'm just a bit hungry." But Obike wasn't okay at all. He couldn't eat or drink, and so he grew slimmer and slimmer until he was on the verge of death. Obike realized his mistake and regretted his decision. If I had known, I would have taken the small apple instead of the larger one. I was too greedy. Obike wished he hadn't been too greedy. He wished he had been contented with his little farm. He regretted stealing from other people's farms. Now he had brought upon himself a curse that he didn't know how to solve. Soon, Obike became desperate. Obike knew if he couldn't find a way to break the curse, he would end up paying the price. In desperation, Obike started visiting different people for a solution. He visited many shamans and priests, but they couldn't break the curse. In his desperate attempt for a solution, he decided to visit the Okawaha, the village chief priest. Okawaha was known as a very powerful priest in Zoro village, known for his ability to break any type of curse. "It is a curse from the gods," the chief priest said, his voice cold but calm. He continued, "You stole all the crops from Chika's farm, and thus the gods have decided to punish you." Obike bit his lips. His face was filled with regret. He looked at the chief priest and said, "Please, what can I do to break this curse? If I continue to live this way, I will die of hunger." The chief priest looked at him with pity and sighed. "The gods of Zoro want you to change your evil ways. To lift the curse, you must return what you stole from the villagers and ask for their forgiveness. Then, with a pure heart and a grateful spirit, you must find the old woman who granted you this power and ask her to lift the curse. If your heart is pure, the curse will be lifted. Otherwise, the curse will only grow stronger." Obike knew what he had to do. With a renewed heart, he walked to the village square in Zoro village and confessed, "I was the one who has been stealing the crops, please forgive me." At first, the villagers were shocked and angry, but when they looked at Obike, they saw the sincerity in his eyes and decided to forgive him. They said, "Okay, we will forgive you, but you must promise to never steal from us again." With a renewed heart, Obike nodded. He promised to never steal from any of the villagers again. He even used the remaining gold he had left to pay back all the villagers. Obike had now learned his lesson. He was no longer the uncontented and greedy person he used to be, but was now kind and helpful to the villagers. However, the curse wasn't gone yet, but Obike continued to look for the old woman. He knew with a kind heart and a grateful spirit, he would eventually find the old woman one day. One sunny day, Obike left his hut determined to find the old woman to lift the curse. He no longer wanted gold or money, but wanted to live a good life in Zoro village. With a strong heart, Obike was determined to find the old woman, but as he searched from dusk to dawn, he still wasn't able to find her. It was as though she vanished into thin air. Soon the night came, yet Obike still couldn't find the old woman. He decided to go home, hoping to find the old woman the next day. But as he entered his house, suddenly he found the old woman standing there, in front of his hut, waiting for him, as though she knew he would come back. Obike walked to the old woman and knelt down. "I have learned my lesson. Please take away the curse from me. I promise to never let greed control me again." The old woman looked at him with a knowing smile and said, "I can break the curse, but you must learn never to let greed enter into your heart again." The old woman also revealed that it was the gods of Zoro, who were constantly watching Obike as he stole from the villagers, that sent her to him to teach him a lesson. They wanted him to stop his greed and change from his evil ways, so they decided to curse him. Obike listened to the old woman and nodded. "I have learned my lesson," he said. "I promise to never let the power of greed take over my heart again." The old woman waved her hand, and with a gentle breeze the power was gone. Obike thanked the woman and returned to the village, no longer the greedy person he once was. He lived his life with contentment and never looked at what other people had. He was now a changed person, no longer the cunning and greedy person he used to be. He had learned his lesson at a price and promised to never let greed into his heart again. The villagers, in surprise, wondered how he was able to remove the curse, not knowing what he had gone through. And so, Obike continued to live in Zoro village, known and loved by all. Although he wasn't as rich as he used to be, at least now he had a good heart and was no longer the greedy person he once was. Thank you for watching. The end. And if you enjoyed this video, just help us click the like button. It's completely free. Let me know in the comments if this story reminded you of another story you have heard before. Thank you.